Hey guys, tonight we begin with the Middle Ages, that glorious 1,000-year stretch where people believed diseases were demons, cats were spies, and the cure for anything involved either prayer or setting something on fire. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out onto the cobbled streets of Strasbourg, July 1518. The air is thick with early summer heat and the scent of fresh bread mingles with the sharp tang of the river. At first, everything seems ordinary. Merchants shout over their stalls, children chase each other with wooden hoops, and the occasional dog wags a muddy tail. But then you notice her, Frau Tropfa, moving as though pulled by some invisible rhythm. She dances alone, yet not lightly, not joyfully. Each step is frantic, almost desperate, as if the ground itself were forcing her to sway and stomp. You rub your eyes, thinking maybe it's a trick of the sun or a clever street performance. But when she doesn't stop, when she keeps going hour after hour, the first whispers begin to ripple through the town. Neighbors watch from shuttered windows, some amused, some confused, others growing quietly alarmed. By day 2, others join her. At first, it's just a few curious onlookers who can't resist the infectious energy, the odd cadence, but soon dozens are moving, twitching and stomping in a spectacle that blends fear with fascination. The cobblestones shake under hundreds of feet. Townsfolk talk in hushed tones, their words bouncing off walls plastered with murals of saints and martyrs. The baker mentions seeing someone collapse mid-step, a man whose eyes remain wide open as though the dance has consumed his very soul. Within a week, some chroniclers claim the number reached 400, a town-wide phenomenon no one can explain. You trudge through the crowd trying to make sense of it. Why are they dancing? Is it punishment? Is it divine inspiration? The priests murmur prayers and sprinkle holy water while the local doctors, faces red with exertion and heat, recommend only more dancing to sweat out the malady. You probably won't survive this kind of medieval logic if you try to reason with it, but you watch anyway, fascinated. Historians still argue whether this was ergot poisoning, fungus-infected rye that acts like LSD, or a mass psychogenic illness, a shared mental contagion born of stress, famine, and superstition. Either way, the effect is the same, a city enslaved by its own feet, rhythmic suffering masquerading as some cosmic performance art. The authorities naturally respond with astonishingly bad judgment. Instead of quarantining the dancers or calming the chaos, they build a stage, hire musicians, and encourage the town to treat it as a festival. Imagine the logic. People are dancing themselves into exhaustion, maybe even death, and the solution is more music. The cobblestones echo with violins, flutes, and the occasional lute while the dancers stumble and collapse mid-step, faces glistening with sweat and confusion. You might lean against a wall, trying to catch your breath and your sanity simultaneously. Contemporary accounts suggest that some people literally danced themselves to death, while others simply lost the will to stop. It's equal parts fascination, horror, and medieval urban planning gone terribly wrong. The scene is chaotic, yet oddly mesmerizing. The smells of food stalls, sweat, and dust mix into a heady, almost intoxicating aroma. Children peek from behind barrels, their eyes wide with awe. Townspeople clutch rosaries and mutter about St. Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, blaming their suffering on offense to divine authority. Others just want the noise to stop. You can almost hear the mental debate of each observer. Is this sin, illness, or entertainment? In the streets, every shuffle, every hop is a question unanswered. Amid the turmoil, the dancers show a strange kind of unity. Their movements sync unintentionally, creating patterns that look deliberate. You find yourself studying their faces, some strained, some blissfully unaware of the danger, others grimly determined. A woman falls to the cobblestones, gasping only to rise again moments later, driven by compulsion that feels utterly alien. The town doctor scratches his head, holding a damp cloth to his brow. Hot blood, he says, sweat it out, more dancing. Meanwhile, priests insist penance, pilgrimage, prayer, sometimes to opposing saints. You realize that in medieval Europe, science, faith, and superstition often collided in ways that made perfect sense to no one. Walking past a small fountain, you notice a man resting against the edge, pale and exhausted. He whispers to a friend that he thinks this is punishment for something he did long ago, perhaps a theft or a lie. Another shakes his head, convinced that the curse is contagious, like a plague carried not by rats but by rhythm. Historians still argue whether the phenomenon was purely psychological or chemically induced, yet either explanation fails to capture the strange beauty and terror of it all. You glimpse the market square from above, a mosaic of flailing limbs, terrified faces, and cautious observers. The city, usually orderly and predictable, is temporarily unrecognizable, as if an invisible conductor has orchestrated chaos for sport. By the end of the month, the streets gradually empty. Frau Tropfa disappears from the records and the musicians are sent home. The townsfolk, exhausted and bewildered, slowly return to their daily routines, selling bread, tending livestock, and muttering prayers under their breath. Plague, famine, and poor hygiene still linger in the background, reminders that while the dance has ended, life in 16th century Strasbourg was never truly safe or predictable. Yet the story persists, a testament to human vulnerability, shared hysteria, and the bizarre ways communities interpret the inexplicable. You stand on the cobbles, brushing dust from your sleeves, thinking of the lessons. Fear, faith, and fungus can be a dangerous mix. Maybe you stretch your legs, relieved not to be caught in the endless rhythm, but also strangely grateful to witness this singularly weird episode of history. You carry the echo of that dance with you, a rhythmic pulse in your imagination, a reminder that sometimes the deadliest parties happen not in clubs, but in the mind and streets of an unsuspecting town. You blink and suddenly find yourself transported to Rome in the bitter chill of early 897 AD, the air thick with incense, smoke, and the faint tang of human fear. The streets are narrow and crowded, winding like labyrinths toward St. Peter's Basilica, which towers over the city like a marble promise of divine authority. Merchants hawk figs and salted fish, while beggars crouch in shadowed archways, muttering prayers in a mix of Latin, Italian, and desperation. You step carefully over uneven cobblestones, the echoes of your boots mingling with the distant toll of church bells, and notice an unusual commotion near the basilica's steps. Crowds gather, whispers ricochet from wall to wall, and a few priests scurry about, robes flapping like anxious wings. At the center of it all is Pope Stephen VI, or as some chroniclers later call him, Pope Stephen the Mad, though historians still argue whether his actions were sheer insanity or calculated political theater. He has ordered a spectacle that seems impossible even in the context of medieval theatrics, the prosecution of a corpse, not a metaphorical trial, not a symbolic ceremony, but the literal exhumation and courtroom prosecution of his predecessor, Pope Formosus. You watch as laborers heave open the tomb, the coffin creaking and splintering, revealing Formosus' remains, which have decayed just enough to make the scene grotesque yet strangely human. A deacon is appointed to speak for the defendant, a necessity because you realize quickly the corpse cannot defend itself. His skeletal jaw hangs slack, a grim mockery of speech, yet he is clothed in full papal regalia. The stole, the tiara, the pallium draped carefully over his shoulders as if the very fabric of divine office could lend dignity to decay. The crowd murmurs. Children are pulled back by wary parents, and some of the more curious townsfolk tiptoe closer, driven by a mixture of fear, fascination, and the medieval equivalent of morbid curiosity for reality TV. The priests chant prayers to stave off evil, while others cross themselves repeatedly, unsure whether the whole affair is holy or blasphemous. Pope Stephen strides forward, eyes blazing with authority or perhaps vengeance. He reads aloud accusations against Formosus, perjury, ambition, simony, and the mortal sin of having existed before Stephen himself ascended the papal throne. His voice booms, reverberating off the stone walls and trembling the gathered spectators. You can almost hear the sound of the bishop's bones rattling as though in protest. A historian would later write that the pope's gestures were as theatrical as any stage performance, waving fingers, pointing to the corpse, and occasionally pausing to let the crowd gasp in horror. Indeed, the entire event reads like a medieval morality play, albeit one performed with an actual corpse and an audience that may have questioned their own souls along the way. The trial drags on, farcical yet chilling. Witnesses are summoned to testify, recounting grievances and supposed misdeeds of the deceased pope. Some are true, others invented, and a few are whispered accusations, impossible to verify but powerful in the charged atmosphere of rumor and fear. The crowd leans in, their eyes wide as they imagine the horrors that led to this extreme justice, or perhaps extreme pettiness. One elderly monk clutches a crucifix, muttering, "God forgive us for witnessing this." A street urchin peers over a shoulder, whispering that he will never trust a pope again. When the verdict arrives, it is swift and merciless, guilty on all counts. Formosus' papal vestments are stripped away, the fingers used for blessings are hacked off, a symbolic severing of his spiritual power, and the corpse is tossed into the Tiber River. The stench of decay rises as the crowd recoils, some fainting, some vomiting, others crossing themselves frantically. You step back, nearly tripping over a stone, wondering how any man could reconcile faith and cruelty in the same breath. The city erupts in chaos. Riots break out in narrow streets, clergy argue heatedly over the propriety of the act, and townsfolk mutter that their pope has become a public spectacle of horror. Behind the outrage, you can almost see the invisible strings of political calculation. Pope Stephen had enemies, rival factions that had maneuvered for influence long before Formosus' death. By desecrating the corpse, Stephen consolidates authority, humiliates opponents, and sends a message that divine office and vengeance can extend beyond death. Historians still argue whether this was genuine piety, calculated political theater, or the result of a mind unmoored by ambition and paranoia. The spectacle also demonstrates the precariousness of the papal office at the time. Authority relied as much on fear and showmanship as it did on faith or doctrine. As the Tiber swallows the remains, you notice how quiet the river becomes afterward, as though even the water itself disapproves of such human vanity. Pope Stephen's triumph is brief. Within months, his opponents imprison him, and he is strangled in his cell, a grim reminder that medieval politics were never kind to those who wielded power without caution. You linger, imagining the whispers that followed, how a man could rise to the height of spiritual authority only to fall victim to the same forces of envy, superstition, and vendetta he had once employed. You wander the streets afterward, watching Romans go about daily life, seemingly indifferent to the theatrical horrors of the basilica. The baker slides a loaf across the counter, a woman calls for her goat, and a child tosses a pebble into a fountain, splashing the water. Life, it seems, continues in its peculiar rhythms, ignoring or absorbing the events that, to you, feel monumental. You catch your reflection in a darkened window, nodding the flicker of candlelight against your face, and wonder how such extreme displays of power and piety shape collective memory. The cadaver synod, as it would later be called, persists as a testament to the extremes of human creativity, devotion, and cruelty. It reminds you that even in an age ostensibly devoted to God, ambition, revenge, and human spectacle could dominate thought, action, and history. You step carefully over a stray cat curling in a shadow, thinking about the absurdity and horror combined, realizing that sometimes reality surpasses imagination, that even death cannot escape judgment in a world driven by fear, faith, and political rivalry. The bones of Formosus lost to the Tiber continue to ripple through history, a dark echo of vanity, vengeance, and divine theater that captivates, horrifies, and endlessly fascinates. You step into midsummer Winchester, the air thick and heavy, clinging to your skin like damp cloth. The sun hangs high, a relentless golden orb, and the stone streets shimmer with heat. The scent of baked bread and roasting meat drifts from market stalls, mingling with the unmistakable tang of human perspiration. In the shadow of the cathedral, you notice a flurry of activity. Monks scurrying with buckets of water, gravediggers wiping sweat from their brows, and curious townsfolk peering at the imposing lead-sealed tombs nestled against the cathedral walls. Something is stirring, something more ominous than the summer heat itself. Inside the cathedral, the air is cooler but heavy with incense and wax, a mix of sanctity and human anxiety. The Bishop of Winchester has recently passed, laid to rest with the care and ceremony customary of his office. He is wrapped in linen, sprinkled with aromatic herbs, juniper, myrrh, and maybe a touch of rosemary, and sealed within a lead-lined coffin. The intention is preservation, dignity, and a measure of spiritual protection. Medieval embalming, though rudimentary by modern standards, was the pinnacle of funerary care. Still, the process is imperfect. Air circulation is minimal, decomposition continues, and heat seeps through the stone walls as the midsummer sun bakes the cathedral. A few days pass and whispers begin. At first, a low moan barely audible over the prayers and chanting. Then more pronounced, the coffin creaks, a sound like wood straining under invisible weight. Monks pause mid-chant, glancing at each other nervously. Someone mutters that it is the soul struggling, escaping purgatory. Another insists it is divine punishment for earthly sins. You wander closer, drawn by curiosity and a sense of impending spectacle, and notice that the coffin lid has shifted slightly, a hairline crack revealing a dark interior. The air is thick with tension, the kind that presses against your chest and makes your heartbeat audible in your ears. By midsummer's peak, the tomb begins to groan loudly. Chroniclers would later describe the sound as a symphony of creaking wood, muffled moans, and a faint whiff of decay. In truth, what is happening is a natural, albeit terrifying, process. Decomposition gases build up inside the sealed coffin. Methane and other gases expand as heat permeates the lead casing, applying pressure to the wood. There is no malice here, no divine wrath. It is simply physics interacting with biology. Yet to the monks and townsfolk who gather outside, it is proof of sin and spiritual unrest. Children clutch their parents' robes, wide-eyed, while elders murmur prayers and cross themselves repeatedly. Historians still argue whether these reports were embellished to create moral lessons or were faithful recordings of a truly horrifying phenomenon. As the hours pass, the pressure continues to build. The coffin bulges slightly at first, then with alarming intensity. You can feel the tension in the air, a collective anticipation of a catastrophic event. When the lid finally splits, it does so with a suddenness that startles everyone. A violent pop, a rush of fetid air, and the top flips open, revealing the partially decomposed remains of the bishop. The smell is overwhelming, a pungent combination of rotting flesh, wax, and herbs meant to mask the decay. Several witnesses faint, others fall to their knees muttering prayers out of nausea, not piety. Word spreads quickly. Tales of the exploding bishop mix with rumor, folklore, and moralistic interpretation. Priests claim divine punishment for pride or gluttony, while townsfolk speculate that the corpse has been restless due to misdeeds in life. Pilgrims come to witness the miracle or the warning, paying coins for a glimpse, for a prayer, for reassurance that the world still contains wonder and terror in equal measure. The cathedral quietly repairs the tomb and seals it again, hoping the scandal will fade. Yet the story lingers, whispered in taverns, recounted at market stalls, and inscribed in chronicles for future generations to marvel at and recoil from. You wander the now empty streets, thinking about human attempts to impose order and meaning on the unavoidable. The midsummer heat, the sealed coffin, the gases, all natural processes twisted into a lesson in morality, a cautionary tale of hubris and divine attention. You notice the glint of lead along the cathedral walls, a reminder that even the most carefully constructed protections can fail under simple physics. This event, grotesque and absurd, also reflects the medieval mind's constant negotiation between faith, fear, and observation. The legend of the exploding bishop endures because it sits at the intersection of science, superstition, and narrative drama. You imagine chroniclers scribbling in candlelight, embellishing details for effect, yet grounded in a kernel of truth. Historians still argue how many accounts are literal, how many metaphorical, and whether medieval society genuinely believed in the moral lesson or merely relished the story. You step into the fatting light of day, the scent of hot stone and summer air clinging to you, carrying the echo of groaning tombs, the whispered prayers of monks, and the reminder that history often lies in the tension between reality and interpretation. In the quiet aftermath, the cathedral resumes its rhythms of worship and devotion, but for those who witness the events, the memory lingers, a testament to the unpredictable, sometimes explosive nature of life, death, and belief in medieval Europe. You pause at a fountain, dipping your fingers in the cool water, and realize that even in the age of faith, the natural world had a way of asserting itself with shocking theatricality, leaving humanity to wonder if miracles and mishaps were ever truly separate. You step into 12th century Europe, a world of stone churches, narrow winding streets, and the ever-present scent of wood smoke mingling with freshly baked bread. The bells toll for matins, echoing across villages where people pause in the sun-drenched lanes to cross themselves or whisper prayers, hands calloused from work and devotion. In a small Italian town, Balsa, a curious crowd gathers in the dim light of a chapel, eyes fixed on the altar where the priest carefully prepares the Eucharist. The air is thick with incense, but it carries another scent too, a strange, slightly metallic tang that seems to linger and whisper of something uncanny. On this morning, the priest, skeptical and yet dutiful, slices the communion wafer, a delicate pale disc of bread that represents the body of Christ in a sacred ritual. Normally, it is unremarkable, a symbol of faith and spiritual nourishment. But today it appears to do the impossible. It begins to bleed. Red droplets form on its surface, slowly at first, then with enough volume to stain the altar cloth beneath. The congregation gasps. Some fall to their knees, overwhelmed by awe and terror. Others clutch rosaries as if their grip could anchor them against the overwhelming mystery. You inch closer, trying to comprehend what you see, heart pounding, the murmurs of astonishment weaving into the hum of candle flames and whispered prayers. Historians still argue whether these events were outright miracles or the result of natural contamination, a strange intersection of faith and biology. Modern microbiologists have identified a red bacterium, Serratia marcescens, capable of growing on moist bread and producing a pigment that looks strikingly like blood. To the medieval mind, however, no rational explanation exists. A bleeding wafer is a clear, unambiguous sign of divine presence, an affirmation of transubstantiation, the belief that bread and wine literally become Christ's body and blood during the sacrament. Skepticism is dangerous in this world. Even the hint of heresy could result in social ostracization or worse. The town's priest, initially a disbeliever, is forced to reconcile personal doubt with overwhelming evidence. He feels the weight of centuries of doctrine pressing against his conscience. To doubt the miracle would be to question God himself, and to question God in the 12th century is a perilous act. Pilgrims arrive from surrounding villages, bringing coins and devotion, eager to witness the phenomenon for themselves. The bleeding wafers attract crowds in waves as if a magnet has drawn them to the chapel, a center of fascination and fear. Some pilgrims claim to feel spiritual warmth, tingling fingers, or sudden clarity. Others faint under the strain of excitement and the overpowering odor of wax and incense. You wander through the gathered crowd, observing reactions that range from ecstatic faith to terror-stricken bewilderment. Local authorities, both religious and civil, struggle to manage the influx of people. Villagers pitch tents in open stalls, selling small trinkets, holy water, and relics associated with the miracle. The line between spiritual devotion and commerce blurs. Miracle and marketing coexist in a strange medieval symbiosis. Even now, you can sense the subtle tension. The town is alive with belief, yet the human desire for storytelling, spectacle, and profit shapes the narrative as much as faith itself. As the days pass, more reports surface from nearby towns. Priests accidentally cut wafers with small nicks, producing faint stains that convince the faithful of ongoing miracles. Historians still debate whether these reports were genuinely perceived events or collective reinforcement of a story everyone wanted to believe. The Church, ever pragmatic, eventually formalizes investigations, seeking to authenticate true miracles and dismiss mundane accidents. Pilgrims, however, continue to flock regardless of official rulings. Faith is rarely rational, and spectacle, once created, has a gravity of its own. In the quiet moments, you step to the side, noting the interplay of perception, belief, and biology. The humble wafer becomes a stage where divine authority, superstition, and unintended microbiological activity converge. You consider the priest's dilemma: to affirm a miracle and cement spiritual authority, or to acknowledge a natural cause and risk scandal. Meanwhile, pilgrims murmur prayers and leave offerings, convinced that they have touched a fragment of the sacred. The air seems charged with invisible energy, faith, and fear entwined, and even a distant observer feels the pull of awe and uncertainty. By the time the story spreads across Europe, bleeding wafers become part of an intricate network of legends. Bishops write letters, chroniclers record details, and the faithful carry home small fragments of altar cloth, desperate to own a piece of the miraculous. Science, centuries later, would demystify the phenomenon, but in the 12th century, rationality is a distant concept. Every droplet is proof, every gasp a witness, and every coin tossed onto the altar a testament to the power of belief and the human desire for wonder. You step back, breathing deeply, the mingling scents of incense, wax, and bread lingering in your nostrils. You realize that these small discs of bread, simple, unassuming, yet powerful, embody a collision of faith, superstition, and accidental microbiology. The bleeding wafers leave you with a sense of awe, a reminder that even the most ordinary objects can become extraordinary when perceived through the lens of devotion, fear, and human imagination. In the quiet of the chapel, you feel the pulse of a world where miracles, accidents, and legend merge seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. You find yourself wandering the narrow, winding streets of Lübeck, a bustling German trading city in the heart of the medieval Hanseatic League. The air is thick with the scents of salted herring, coal smoke, and damp straw from market stalls. Merchants shout over each other, hawking dried fish, woolen cloth, and copper trinkets, while children dart between carts and horses, chasing one another with shrieks of laughter that echo off timber-framed buildings. But amidst the ordinary chaos, something strange stirs, a whisper carried on the wind, a tension in the atmosphere that makes the townsfolk glance nervously at the alleys and cellars. You follow a faint squeaking noise down a narrow lane, past barrels of pickled vegetables and carts loaded with sacks of grain, and there it is, a sight so bizarre it halts your breath. A tangled mass of rats, their tails fused together by dirt, excrement, and the sticky remnants of rotting food. Historians now call it a rat king, a phenomenon that seems almost impossibly grotesque and unnatural. The creatures squirm as one, limbs flailing, squeaks intertwining into a high-pitched chorus of chaos. To medieval eyes, this is not merely odd, it is a living omen. Gasps ripple through onlookers as they clutch rosaries, muttering prayers to stave off what they interpret as divine wrath. As you step closer, you notice that the rats' movements are coordinated, forced together by circumstance, yet interpreted as intentional. The townsfolk are convinced that God's displeasure manifests through this unnatural unity, a warning that plague, famine, or sin is near. You hear an elderly woman whisper that the appearance of a rat king always precedes a great pestilence, a thought that tightens a knot of anxiety in your stomach. The rational mind struggles against the weight of superstition, but in Lübeck, where literacy is rare and disease ever-present, fear often outweighs reason. Chroniclers even record instances of townsfolk burning entire cellars to cleanse the perceived curse, an attempt to purify not just their homes but their fates. Historians still debate whether rat kings were as common as medieval accounts suggest, or if the stories were exaggerated to moralize on human sin. Modern science offers explanations. Young rats trapped in a nest with sticky substances, sap, excrement, or freezing mud, can become entangled, their tails fusing as they grow. Yet the spectacle remains grotesque, uncanny, and horrifying to anyone witnessing it without prior context. You imagine the scene unfolding before you, merchants halting trade to gawk, children recoiling, and priests muttering about divine punishment and impending mortality. The psychological effect is profound. Each sighting reinforces collective fear, embedding itself into the cultural imagination. Rats, already feared as disease carriers, now symbolize a direct, tangible expression of sin's consequences. You notice the air seems heavier in their presence, a combination of stench, panic, and the oppressive awareness of the plague that haunts every city. Some townspeople interpret the movement of the tangled rats as omens for specific households. A squeak here, a turn there, portending death, illness, or misfortune. The animal kingdom becomes a conduit for divine messaging, the natural world entwined with spiritual interpretation in ways that modern science would later explain but medieval Europe could only narrate through awe and fear. As you continue through Lübeck's alleys, the city seems to pulse with anxiety. You pass a baker who wipes sweat from his brow while casting nervous glances at a nearby cellar, a blacksmith, hammer suspended midair, muttering prayers under his breath, and a group of women who have stopped their laundry, fingers clutching rosaries, murmuring invocations to saints. Every shadow could conceal another entangled mass of rodents. Every squeak carries moral significance. The line between natural occurrence and spiritual portent is virtually non-existent. Eventually, word spreads that a rat king has appeared near the docks, leading to pilgrimages of curiosity and caution. Priests bless the streets, sprinkling holy water and chanting incantations intended to purify both city and conscience. Merchants erect small shrines, hoping to protect goods from the imagined wrath, while children are hurried home, eyes wide with fear and fascination. The city reacts as if the tangled rodents represent an irrefutable divine message. God is displeased, the devil is laughing, and mortality is imminent. Yet beneath the superstition lies an underlying truth. Lübeck's cellars are overcrowded, unsanitary, and infested with rodents. The rat kings, strange as they are, occur naturally under conditions of poor hygiene and confinement. Nature itself produces events that humans interpret as divine omens when knowledge is limited, and fear runs high. Historians still argue about how often rat kings inspired true mass panic versus local folklore embellishment, but the symbolism is undeniable. In the medieval imagination, disease and sin are inseparable, and the bizarre becomes a moral lesson. You step back from the writhing mass, observing the fear, fascination, and ritual responses of the townsfolk. You realize that the story of the Rat King is not just about the rats themselves, but about the human need to assign meaning to chaos, to find cause and consequence in the inexplicable. You carry with you the echo of squeaks, the oppressive awareness of plague, and the visceral horror of seeing life so entangled that it seems both unnatural and divine simultaneously. In Lübeck, superstition, observation, and survival intertwine, leaving an indelible mark on memory, imagination, and history itself. You trudge along a misty path in the rolling hills of 7th century Wales, the grass slick with dew and the air crisp enough to bite at your cheeks. Sheep bleat distantly, their woolly forms blending into the fog, and the sound of a bubbling stream grows louder as you approach a modest stone chapel nestled between moss-covered rocks. Villagers scurry about, carrying buckets, offering prayers, or simply craning their necks to glimpse the mysterious waters said to flow from a miraculous spring. The legend is old, whispered in every hearth and marketplace. A young woman, St. Winifred, decapitated by a spurned suitor, miraculously returned to life, leaving behind a spring of healing water where her head had fallen. You pause for a moment, feeling the chill of the Welsh air, and imagine the tragedy that birthed a centuries-long pilgrimage. The story begins with Caradoc, a nobleman who pursued Winifred with persistence bordering on obsession. She resisted, seeking sanctuary in a chapel where her uncle, St. Bruno, prayed. Caradoc's rage culminated in violence. He severed her head. You can almost see the shock of the villagers, the scattered feathers of a startled bird, the clamor of feet on stone. As the horror unfolds in your mind, yet the miracle occurs instantly. St. Bruno, calm in the midst of chaos, lifts Winifred's head and restores it to her body. Miraculously alive, she survives long enough to embrace religious devotion, ultimately becoming a nun, a saint, and the patron of those who endure far worse days than most. The spring bubbles forth at the spot where her head had fallen, icy and clear, its waters tinged with both legend and mineral. Historians still argue whether the miraculous spring was purely symbolic, an embellishment over time, or if the physical properties of the water contributed to perceived healing. Either way, pilgrims arrive in droves. You step forward, dipping your hand into the frigid water. The chill bites sharply, yet it carries an oddly comforting clarity. Villagers claim cures for blindness, fevers, paralysis, and even emotional ailments. Some throw coins into the spring as offerings, others kneel, muttering prayers, letting their foreheads brush the water's surface. The air vibrates with whispered thanks, the low hum of hope and fear mingling like threads in an unseen tapestry. Over the centuries, the spring becomes an enduring destination. Even during the Reformation, when reformers attempt to close the shrine and drain the well to suppress Catholic superstition, the water continues to flow, defying human intervention. You watch pilgrims slip quietly under cover of darkness to immerse themselves, determined that faith will endure despite ecclesiastical decrees. The spring's resilience is almost tangible, a subtle hum beneath the murmurs of devotion, as if the earth itself refuses to be audited. Geological studies later confirm that the water is rich in minerals, iron, and trace elements, lending a plausible explanation to the purported healing. Yet to the medieval mind, this is immaterial. What matters is that the water works in its own mysterious way. The pilgrimage rituals are immersive and sensory. You observe villagers walking barefoot along stone paths, hands clasped in prayer, voices low and rhythmic. Candles flicker in the chapel, scent of wax blending with the crisp spring air. Pilgrims bring herbs, small tokens, and even fragments of personal linen to be dipped into the water, hoping to capture a portion of its miraculous essence. Children watch wide-eyed, learning the stories of courage, faith, and miraculous survival that form the cultural backbone of their community. Even skeptics often find themselves drawn into the ceremony, their rational minds softened by the hypnotic rhythm of chanting, splashing water, and shared hope. Legends evolve alongside devotion. Stories of St. Winifred multiply, miraculous recoveries, vivid dreams, and subtle guidance attributed to her spirit. Her life becomes a template for virtue and resilience, her decapitation a symbol of human cruelty overcome by divine intervention. You notice plaques, small chapels, and carved stones commemorating her legend, each marking centuries of reverence, fear, and hope. Historians still debate the degree to which the miraculous narrative reflects historical events versus pious storytelling, but even skeptics must acknowledge the profound impact of faith on social cohesion and identity. As the sun dips behind rolling hills, casting long shadows across the chapel in spring, the scene softens. The sound of water becomes rhythmic, almost musical, and the chill of the icy stream numbs the edges of your awareness. You step back, letting the experience settle, centuries of pilgrimage, devotion, and legend distilled into a single, tangible moment. Faith, superstition, and geology converge, reminding you that human belief is as enduring as stone, as fluid as water, and as cold yet invigorating as the spring itself. You linger for a moment longer, imagining generations of pilgrims before you, hands pressed to the same icy water, whispering the same prayers, carrying the same hopes. The spring continues to flow, indifferent to skepticism, legend, or time, a quiet witness to centuries of human aspiration, fear, and reverence. In its chill, you sense both mortality and transcendence, an enduring reminder that even the most tragic events can give rise to wonder, and that legend can be as real as the cold bite of water on skin, etching itself into memory and history alike. You walk along the uneven cobblestones of early 14th century Paris, the air thick with smoke from hearth fires, and the low murmur of a city alive with both commerce and fear. Merchants shout over the clamor, hawking silks, grains, and coins, while street children dodge carts and horses, laughter mingling with the occasional scream of a spooked animal. Above the chaos, the imposing spires of Notre Dame pierce the sky, their shadows stretching over the city like silent witnesses to an impending drama. Somewhere in the royal palace, King Philip IV, known to history as Philip the Fair, paces with barely restrained fury. His kingdom is in debt, his pride wounded, and his patience with one particular institution, an order of knights with unmatched wealth and influence, is at an exhausting low. The Knights Templar, once valiant protectors of pilgrims in the Holy Land, are now a sprawling network of bankers, fortress builders, and influential figures across Europe. They hold vaults brimming with gold, lend money to kings, and enforce contracts with the quiet efficiency of disciplined warriors. In another age, their reputation would inspire awe. In Philip's France, it inspires envy and fear. You sense the subtle tension as Philip plots, an empire teetering on the edge of fiscal ruin, a group of knights whose coffers could rival the crown itself, and a king who will not tolerate being indebted to anyone. Medieval power dynamics are cruelly simple. Wealth threatens authority, and the powerful must be reminded of their place, often violently. October 1307 arrives, a day that will echo across centuries. You stand among the Parisian populace as royal guards sweep through, arresting every Templar within the kingdom on the same morning. The charges are sensational: heresy, idolatry, blasphemy, and the scandalous allegation of kissing each other's feet, an accusation that feels absurd and petty yet carries deadly weight. Knights who once fought in the deserts of the Holy Land are dragged in shackles, eyes wide with disbelief and dread. They are tortured in cold, damp dungeons, forced to confess to crimes they may not have committed. The cries of pain mingle with the low chants of priests, as if the very air conspires to twist faith into fear. Historians still argue whether Philip's accusations were entirely fabricated or if some ritual deviations truly occurred. The line between political expediency and actual heresy is, as always, blurred. Jacques de Molay, the Templar Grand Master, is among those imprisoned, his bearing unbroken despite the harsh treatment. Days turn into weeks as confessions are extracted, often through unimaginable methods: burning irons, water torture, and constant psychological pressure. You imagine the gnawing despair, the struggle to maintain dignity in a world where justice bends to the whims of kings. Philip's goal is clear: annihilate the Templars, seize their wealth, and erase the threat to his authority. Yet even amid betrayal and humiliation, de Molay retains a fierce defiance. On the scaffold, as flames rise around him in Paris in 1314, he curses both the king and the pope, summoning them to meet divine judgment within the year. The words hang in the air, heavy with theatricality, defiance, and inevitability. Poetic justice, as it turns out, is not merely literary. Philip dies within the year, thrown from his horse during a hunt in a dramatic twist of fate that makes observers question whether the curse might indeed carry weight. Pope Clement V follows shortly after, confirming the eerie resonance of de Molay's final pronouncement. The Templars are gone as an order, yet their reputation, their mystique, and the legend of their vengeance refuse to die. Europe whispers about curses, divine retribution, and the arrogance of men who overreach. The slow burn of poetic justice unfolds in real time, blending history with myth, fact with fear. You navigate the streets of Paris in the aftermath, noticing the uneasy equilibrium that remains. Former Templar properties are absorbed into the crown, treasures vanish, and the order's knowledge of fortifications, finance, and diplomacy fades into secrecy. Yet the memory lingers, whispered rumors of hidden hoards, secret rituals, and the specter of vengeance. Medieval societies, you realize, thrive on such stories. They teach caution, inspire awe, and enforce moral lessons without ever needing official law. The Templars' downfall illustrates the precarious balance between power, wealth, and trust in the medieval world. Kings, even those cloaked in divinely sanctioned authority, are vulnerable to the very institutions they seek to dominate. You see the city reacting to fear as much as fact. Citizens whisper of curses, clergy murmur of heresy, and the air is thick with speculation. Historians still debate whether Damale's curse genuinely influenced subsequent events or if coincidence simply wrapped itself in the dramatic cloak of legend. Either way, the narrative persists, shaping perceptions of justice, divine will, and the consequences of betrayal. Walking past Notre Dame, you sense the shadow of history pressing close. The Templars' legacy is a paradox. Their military might erased, their order dissolved, yet their story enduring, inspiring tales of mystery, revenge, and moral reckoning. You glimpse the intersection of faith, fear, and financial power, understanding how a small group of disciplined knights could both command kingdoms and unsettle them. The streets, the spires, and the quiet alleys are alive with echoes of swords, prayers, and curses that will reverberate for centuries. In the lingering dusk, as smoke from hearths curls into the violet sky, you feel the weight of medieval power struggles, the human capacity for envy and cruelty, and the strange satisfaction of slow, poetic justice. The Templars may have fallen, but their story teaches a timeless lesson. Crossing the wrong man or order can produce consequences far beyond immediate comprehension, stretching across time and space, leaving a legacy woven into history itself. You step into 14th century Europe, a continent gripped by one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. The streets are thick with the stench of rot, the smell of unburied corpses mingling with smoke from feeble hearth fires. Vendors hawk bread, cheese, and herbs over the moans and coughs of the suffering, their voices strained, hoarse, and barely audible above the chaos. Villagers peek from shuttered windows, fearful of venturing outside, yet compelled to observe the horrors that have become ordinary, swollen buboes, fevered delirium, and death arriving with unsettling swiftness. Into this nightmare steps a figure unlike any you've encountered before, the Plague Doctor. The first thing that strikes you is the costume. A long, waxed leather coat that glints dully in the muted sunlight, gloves sealed tight at the wrists, boots stiff and polished, and a wide-brimmed hat shading eyes already weary from witnessing humanity's suffering. Most unnerving of all is the beaked mask, protruding like a bird's snout, filled with aromatic herbs, spices, and sometimes vinegar-soaked cloth, meant to filter the miasma that everyone believes carries disease. It is simultaneously protective, grotesque, and theatrical. As you follow the doctor along narrow alleyways, you notice how pedestrians recoil, both in fear of the disease and the embodiment of that fear. The mask transforms the human into a living symbol of dread, a walking reminder of the invisible threat that haunts every street, every house, every breath. Historians still argue whether the Plague Doctor outfit genuinely provided protection or was largely a psychological comfort. Modern science suggests the wax coat may have helped prevent some flea bites, but the masks, however aromatic, were useless against Yersinia pestis, the bacterium causing the Black Death. Yet to the people of the 14th century, appearance is reassurance. The sight of a doctor, even grotesque, implies care, authority, and a desperate hope that knowledge, even misapplied, can stave off death. You observe the ritualistic precision of their work. A wooden cane or staff is used to poke the afflicted from a safe distance, to measure pulses, or to prod bodies for signs of life. The doctor never touches the patient directly, creating an eerie combination of bedside manner and grotesque detachment. The Plague Doctor's duties are simultaneously mundane and horrifying. They record deaths in meticulous ledgers, tallying the ebb and flow of mortality as though measurement could confer understanding or control. They lance buboes, attempt minor remedies, and advise families on quarantine procedures that may or may not help. Often, the practitioners are not trained physicians, but volunteers, barber surgeons, or desperate townspeople seeking payment and protection from the plague's indiscriminate fury. The profession is a precarious balance of civic duty, economic necessity, and sheer survival instinct. Walking behind one, you notice a small crowd of children observing from a distance, their eyes wide with curiosity and terror. The mask and staff elevate the doctor to a supernatural status, almost like a grim angel or harbinger of doom. Merchants whisper in hushed tones, "The doctor has come, we must prepare." You see villagers clumsily dragging bedsheets over doors, burning herbs to purify the air, and sprinkling vinegar at thresholds. The line between science, superstition, and sheer panic is nearly invisible. Across Europe, variations of the Plague Doctor emerge. Some wear masks stuffed with aromatic herbs like lavender, rosemary, or cloves. Others embellish the costume with colored wax or feathers, creating an almost carnival-like appearance amidst death and despair. This blending of fear and fashion highlights the human tendency to ritualize protection, to make the invisible visible, to impose order on chaos. You can almost feel the rhythm of medieval cities adapting to crisis. Commerce slows, worship intensifies, superstition flourishes, and the Plague Doctor becomes an iconic figure in a world desperate for control. Even with precautions, many doctors succumb to the plague, a grim testament to the limits of understanding. Their deaths reinforce fear and awe, cementing the figure in collective memory. Contemporary chroniclers describe their eerie presence in alleyways, entering homes with solemn detachment and leaving behind a sense of both relief and dread. For many, the beaked figure becomes a visual metaphor for mortality itself, a walking reminder that no one, regardless of faith, wealth, or status, is safe. Historians still debate whether the plague doctor costume influenced later medical practices or served primarily as theater. Yet its image endures in culture, a haunting symbol of the intersection between fear, public health, and human ingenuity under crisis. You watch the waxed coat glint in a shaft of sunlight, the mask's empty eyes staring ahead, the staff tapping rhythmically against cobblestones, and you feel a peculiar mixture of fascination, horror, and admiration for the resilience of those who attempted to confront an invisible, deadly foe with only rudimentary knowledge and immense courage. By nightfall, the city quiets, the moans of the sick mingling with the soft hiss of fires burning herbs and incense. You step back from the streets, carrying with you the image of the plague doctor, grotesque, fearsome, and strangely heroic. In the haze of smoke and candlelight, the figure symbolizes the Middle Ages' complex dance with disease, a blend of superstition, experimentation, and the relentless drive to survive. And as you move away, the echo of wooden staff tapping on stone lingers, a ghostly rhythm marking humanity's ongoing struggle against unseen adversaries. You wander along a winding, mist-laden road in the Welsh countryside, the fog rolling in soft, gray waves that cling to your cloak and settle into the hollows of the hills. The moon casts a faint, silvery glow over the landscape, illuminating gnarled trees and stone walls slick with dew. In the stillness, the world seems suspended between reality and dream, and then there it is, a faint, dancing light hovering just above the ground. Your pulse quickens as you realize this is no ordinary lantern carried by a traveler. It drifts and weaves, floating independently, eerily silent, and impossibly bright against the mist. You have encountered a corpse light. Medieval villagers believed these spectral orbs were harbingers of death, a direct communication from the divine or a warning of demonic presence. Some whispered that the size of the light corresponded to the age or social status of the soon-to-be departed. A tiny flicker for a child, a grand, glowing orb for an adult of note. Parents held children close, clutching them to their chests, while travelers hurried along paths, muttering prayers or tossing coins at the earth to appease unseen forces. The lights were both terrifying and mesmerizing, drawing the eye while compelling caution, an instinctual mix of awe and fear. Historians still debate whether corpse lights were truly supernatural, or merely a combination of natural phenomena misinterpreted through cultural lenses. Modern science offers an explanation rooted in chemistry. Decomposing organic matter releases gases such as phosphine, methane, and diphosphane, which can spontaneously ignite in moist conditions. These ignited gases create a ghostly glow above bogs, marshes, and graveyards, appearing to float and flicker as though possessed. Yet to the medieval mind, this was no accidental combustion. It was a message. Every glowing orb was a whisper of mortality, a visible reminder of sin, divine judgment, and the fragile boundary between life and death. As you walk closer to a stone bridge over a misty stream, the light flits in a wide arc, drifting toward the trees before pausing and pulsing like a heartbeat. Villagers whisper urgently from the shadows, warning that those who ignore the light might soon face death themselves. You notice how the lights are often reported near gravesites, a correlation that seems to validate superstition. Priests declare that these are angels guiding souls to the afterlife or demons luring travelers into peril, each interpretation as plausible and terrifying as the next. The phenomenon dominates local folklore, influencing funeral rituals, prayers, and even the timing of travel. The spectacle is not consistent. Some lights appear as faint, pale glimmers, others flare brightly, almost blinding in the fog. They move unpredictably, sometimes ascending, sometimes skimming the ground, tracing paths that eventually fade into darkness. Witnesses report feelings of dread, dizziness, or a strange compulsion to follow the light, a combination of fear and fascination that lingers long after the orb vanishes. Chroniclers record these experiences in detailed accounts, blending observation with moral lessons. Disregard divine warning at your own peril, maintain piety, and respect the veil between the living and the dead. Even daily life becomes shaped by the phenomenon. Farmers delay trips to the fields at dusk, wary of crossing areas where corpse lights have been sighted. Children are told cautionary tales of lost souls carried off by glowing spirits, reinforcing social norms and obedience. Priests incorporate warnings into sermons, emphasizing the importance of confession, prayer, and moral conduct, using the lights as both cautionary tale and visual reinforcement of doctrine. The community collectively interprets natural occurrences through the lens of spiritual significance, blending fear with communal cohesion. Historians still argue about the balance between folklore and observation. Were corpse lights purely psychological responses to fog, fatigue, and anxiety? Or were they the early documentation of a natural chemical process misunderstood as spiritual communication? Either way, they demonstrate how medieval societies explained the inexplicable. using pattern recognition, superstition, and religious authority to make sense of phenomena that defy comprehension. Walking among the fog, you sense that the fear inspired by the lights is as important as the lights themselves, shaping behavior, belief, and social structure across generations. As the mist thickens and the orb flickers one last time before vanishing into darkness, you feel a chill that is both physical and existential. The roads are silent again, yet the presence of the corpse lights lingers in memory, a haunting blend of science and superstition, warning and wonder. You step carefully over the slick stones, aware of the duality. The explanation may be chemical, but the impact is human, embedding the supernatural into the very fabric of medieval life. The fog closes around you, and the distant hoot of an owl echoes, carrying with it the same unease and fascination that villagers have felt for centuries. In this interplay of natural law and human interpretation, you realize that corpse lights were more than apparitions. They were a lens through which communities navigated mortality, morality, and meaning. A luminous reminder that even ordinary landscapes could become theaters for the extraordinary when belief and fear intertwined. You step into a bustling medieval apothecary, the air thick with the pungent aromas of herbs, resins, and something far less definable, an undercurrent of decay, incense, and mysterious powders that seem to promise both cure and curse. Shelves groan under the weight of jars filled with dried roots, powdered stones, and curious animal parts, lizards' tails, powdered snakes, and the occasional jar ominously labeled mumia. Outside, the streets are alive with vendors shouting remedies for plague, fever, and toothaches, while peasants clutching herbs and charms push through throngs, desperate for relief from ailments both mundane and terrifying. The medieval approach to medicine blends observation, superstition, and ritual in ways that can seem absurd to modern eyes. You watch as a healer, hands coated in a fine dusting of powdered herbs, instructs a patient to smear crocodile dung across their face as a sunscreen. The explanation is practical in the logic of the time. It repels the sun's heat, wards off invisible spirits, and incidentally keeps insects away. You recoil slightly, imagining the aroma and the tactile sensation, yet nod along with the gathered crowd who treat this ritual as the height of scientific wisdom. Historians still argue whether such remedies were purely symbolic, largely psychological, or possessed any measurable effect at all. Apothecaries often rely on a mixture of observation and hearsay, drawing from classical texts, local folklore, and alchemical experiments. You see a curious table where powdered mummy, imported from Egypt and prized for its supposed healing qualities, is being sold to a noblewoman suffering from gout. The powder is ground meticulously, mixed with wine or honey, and consumed in tiny doses, believed to transfer the ancient vitality of the deceased into the living body. It is a practice simultaneously macabre, mystical, and shockingly mainstream for the period. You can almost hear the skepticism of modern scientists whispering from centuries ahead, yet in this world, mumia is medicine, not museum curiosity. Other remedies are no less extraordinary. For persistent headaches, healers recommend placing a live spider in a cloth bag and tying it to the temple, a procedure meant to transfer pain from the patient to the arachnid. For colic in infants, crushed pearls, amber, and rare stones are dissolved in water, while poultices of onions, vinegar, and cow dung are applied to wounds to draw out evil humors. Some treatments rely on celestial timing. Plants must be harvested under a specific moon phase, bloodletting is timed according to astrological charts, and prayers are recited over tinctures as integral components of efficacy. You feel the weight of these practices, a mixture of hope, ritual, and desperation, shaping lives in ways as much psychological as physiological. Alchemy and magic blur the line between medicine and miracle. Healers employ talismans, incantations, and charms alongside tinctures and ointments, insisting that illness is caused by a combination of bodily imbalance, demonic influence, and astral interference. You watch a patient drink a concoction of mercury, powdered gems, and rosewater, while the apothecary murmurs incantations to balance the humors and appease wandering spirits. Modern readers might recoil at the mercury, but to contemporaries, it represents a harmonious fusion of science and spirituality, an attempt to impose order on an unpredictable world. You notice the market atmosphere, vendors shouting the virtues of cat's blood for blindness, powdered gold for fever, and crushed pearls for longevity. Every cure promises more than relief. It promises transformation, protection, and a glimpse of mastery over fate. Patients move between stalls, negotiating prices, listening to recommendations from elders, and sometimes consulting local priests or astrologers before ingesting any remedy. In this society, medicine is inseparable from community, ritual, and belief. Even failed cures serve to reinforce the healer's authority or the lesson of divine will. In homes across the countryside, domestic remedies proliferate alongside apothecary advice. Families prepare infusions from garlic, marigold, and honey, tie charms to doorways, or sprinkle holy water over newborns. Children learn early that medicine is as much about timing, ritual, and faith as it is about ingredients. You see mothers whispering prayers over a poultice, fathers nodding the phases of the moon for bloodletting, and neighbors exchanging advice on everything from dandruff to black bile. It is a world where observation and superstition coexist in an uneasy but functional partnership. Historians still debate the efficacy of these remedies. Some, like herbal infusions and poultices, had practical effects, easing symptoms or preventing infection. Others, like mummy powder or crocodile dung, likely did more psychological than physical good. Yet their persistence illuminates a culture striving to understand the human body, disease, and the unseen forces believed to govern both. Medicine becomes an intersection of faith, empirical observation, and cultural imagination, a reflection of the human desire to control fate even when knowledge is limited. You linger in the apothecary, inhaling the mingled scents of herbs, minerals, and strange powders. Each jar and vial carries stories, legends, and centuries of human ingenuity applied under the harsh conditions of medieval life. The bizarre, the mystical, and the practical converge, offering both relief and wonder. You realize that while modern medicine has replaced many of these practices, the spirit of experimentation, the hope against suffering, and the human drive to intervene against nature's cruelty remain unchanged. As the sun sets outside, casting long shadows over cobblestones and rooftops, you step away from the apothecary, carrying the memory of strange cures, macabre powders, and the delicate balance of faith and science. The Middle Ages oddities remind you that healing was not just about the body but the mind, the spirit, and the stories we tell ourselves to survive. The air hums with faint aromas of herbs and incense, a lingering testament to humanity's eternal pursuit of remedies, miraculous or otherwise, in a world both beautiful and terrifying. You step into the bustling town square, the morning fog still lingering over the cobblestones, and immediately sense the tension in the air. The crowd has gathered for a spectacle unlike anything you've seen, justice in the Middle Ages, which is as much performance as it is punishment. Merchants pause mid-sale, children cling to their parents' skirts, and the scent of roasting meat mingles with the acrid tang of smoke from nearby torches. Wooden scaffolds, wheels, and iron cages are positioned prominently, their dark forms a foreboding backdrop against the pale light of dawn. You realize that in this world, law is public theater. Fear is part of the sentence, and superstition and spectacle are inseparable. The first execution you witness involves the infamous breaking wheel, a device that turns law into a cruel demonstration. A man accused of robbery is strapped to the large wooden wheel, his limbs splayed across its spokes. The executioner raises a heavy iron hammer and delivers precise, calculated blows, ensuring the punishment is both excruciating and instructive. Medieval audiences believe that public suffering teaches morality. Every crack of bone is a lesson, a warning that crime carries consequences. Historians still argue whether such punishments were intended primarily as deterrents or as ritualized affirmations of authority, yet the effect on the crowd is undeniable, a mixture of horror, fascination, and the grim recognition of mortality. Nearby, a set of stocks holds a woman accused of petty theft, her arms and legs immobilized while villagers jeer and hurl rotten vegetables. The humiliation, almost as brutal as the physical pain elsewhere, reinforces social hierarchies and community norms. You notice the subtle interplay of gender, class, and superstition. Her punishment is partly about law, partly about shamming, and partly about appeasing divine or cosmic justice. Local clergy sometimes preside over these spectacles, sprinkling holy water or chanting prayers, a blend of spiritual sanction and theatricality that turns punishment into ritual. Further along, a man accused of heresy is bound and subjected to the rack, a device that stretches limbs painfully while testing the body's endurance. You watch as the ropes pull, joints pop, and the victim gasps, a cruel dance between confession and survival. Torture is not random, it follows a logic that blends interrogation with spectacle. Witnesses take mental notes, the executioner maintains rhythm and order, and the audience alternates between sympathy and fascination. The event serves multiple purposes, instilling fear, reinforcing authority, and transforming abstract laws into visceral, unforgettable experiences. Medieval superstition shapes many punishments. Those accused of witchcraft or consorting with demons often face bizarre trials, dunking, carrying hot iron, or walking barefoot over glowing embers. These tests, believed to reveal guilt or innocence by divine intervention, are deeply theatrical. For example, a suspected witch might be tied and thrown into a pond. If she floats, she is proven guilty. If she sinks, she is innocent, though frequently at the cost of her life either way. The intertwining of faith, fear, and legal authority makes the process as much a moral lesson as a judicial procedure, reinforcing both religious and civic hierarchies. In certain regions, punishment extends beyond the body into symbolic displays. Heads might be placed on spikes outside city gates, hands nailed to church doors, or criminals paraded through towns in iron cages. These acts serve as permanent, visible reminders of law and order. You notice the subtle theatricality. Executioners wear masks or ceremonial garb, scaffolds are decorated with painted emblems, and clergy may bless or condemn the proceedings aloud. Public reaction ranges from solemn reflection to shocked amusement, a testament to the complex emotional landscape of medieval justice. Historians still debate the effectiveness of such spectacles. Were they intended purely to deter crime, or did they also satisfy a psychological need for communal catharsis? Evidence suggests both. The audience experiences fear, relief, and moral reaffirmation simultaneously. The ritualization of punishment blurs the line between justice and entertainment, creating a system in which authority is both observed and performed. You notice children pointing, merchants whispering gossip, and nobles nodding approval, each participant enmeshed in the performance of societal order. Other punishments are highly specialized, tailored to the perceived severity or type of crime. For example, counterfeiters might be branded or have their tongues pierced, adulterers confined in cages for extended periods, and thieves forced to carry heavy weights publicly. The methods often incorporate elements of symbolism. Branding marks ownership and shame, weights convey the burden of wrongdoing, and cages make transgression visible and permanent. Even in these small acts, the theatrical nature of justice remains central. You see local executioners discussing technique, passing down knowledge orally or through apprenticeships, ensuring that every blow, twist, or humiliation is executed with precision. Their craft is both practical and performative. A misstep could ruin the effect or undermine authority. The interplay between skill, timing, and audience reaction makes every punishment a carefully choreographed drama, blending brutality with aesthetics in ways that modern observers find both fascinating and horrifying. As the day wears on, the crowd begins to thin, yet the lingering sense of spectacle remains. Bodies are removed, scaffolds disassembled, and the square slowly returns to market life. Still, stories circulate. Did you see the woman on the stocks? The man on the wheel cried for hours. Oral tradition ensures that these punishments resonate beyond the immediate event, shaping communal memory, reinforcing morality, and perpetuating the intertwining of law, superstition, and theater. As the evening descends over the town, torches flicker, casting long dancing shadows across the cobblestones. The lingering aroma of burnt wood, sweat, and unwashed bodies clings to the air, a subtle reminder of the day's public spectacles. You follow the remnants of the crowd as they disperse, noticing small clusters of people retelling the events with dramatic flair. Stories of the breaking wheel, the stocks, and the rack are embroidered with each telling, turning harsh punishments into almost mythic narratives. In this society, law and lore intertwine seamlessly. The very act of recounting punishment reinforces authority, morality, and communal identity. In the shadowed alleyways, smaller, more personal punishments unfold. Pickpockets are tied to posts overnight, subjected to ridicule and discomfort rather than outright execution. Villagers sometimes throw mud, and neighbors might chant or sing moralizing rhymes, transforming punishment into a communal performance. Even these subtler acts carry the same mix of humiliation and ritualized justice as the grand public spectacles. You sense that every punishment, no matter how small, is a thread in the social fabric, binding community norms with visible consequences. Some cities employ creative devices to exact penance in theatrical ways. The infamous pillory forces a criminal to sit upright with head and hands trapped in wooden frames, often for hours in public view. Birds sometimes perch on exposed heads, adding insult to injury, while children mock, adults gawk, and the clergy occasionally sprinkle holy water to bless the ordeal. The pillory exemplifies the blend of theater and justice. It's punishment, moral instruction, and entertainment, all rolled into one. Scholars still debate whether the humiliation or the physical restraint was the primary mechanism of deterrence, but to medieval townsfolk, both are integral. For more serious crimes, executions extend into symbolic cruelty, often designed to dramatize moral lessons. Heretics may face burning at the stake, their fate staged to demonstrate divine judgment. You observe a scaffold rising high above the square, its design ensuring maximum visibility and impact. Flames will consume the condemned, but the careful choreography ensures the audience witnesses not only punishment but moral and spiritual closure. Executioners, sometimes assisted by priests, coordinate the timing, ensuring every flicker of fire and gasp of air becomes part of the educational spectacle. Punishments sometimes incorporate animals, believed to carry symbolic or divine significance. Wolves or dogs may be used to intimidate, punish, or humiliate criminals. You see a thief forced to walk through a pack of barking dogs, each animal tethered and trained to nip but not kill, reinforcing authority, fear, and spectacle simultaneously. These acts demonstrate the medieval inclination to blend physical suffering with allegorical meaning. The criminal's body is not the only canvas. The performance educates, entertains, and moralizes. Torture for interrogation adds another layer of complexity. The rack, thumbscrews, and other devices aren't merely instruments of pain, they are part of a procedural and theatrical system designed to extract confession while impressing the audience with the power of the law. You watch as the accused is methodically stretched or twisted, a priest or magistrate reciting prayers, while townsfolk observe from behind barriers. The cadence of the punishment is deliberate. Tension builds, the body contorts, and confession becomes inevitable, creating a ritualized rhythm that merges fear, law, and performance art. Public executions often coincide with festivals or religious observances, transforming the town square into a stage where morality, faith, and civic authority converge. You notice how the timing of these punishments aligns with market days, feast days, and significant celestial events. The presence of clergy, nobles, and merchants ensures that justice is both seen and sanctioned across all layers of society. In some cases, criminals are paraded through the streets in elaborate cages or on decorated wagons before final punishment, a slow-moving lesson in compliance and consequence. Superstition colors the interpretation of criminal behavior and punishment. Misfortune, omens, and divine signs are woven into legal proceedings. A lightning strike during an execution might be interpreted as God's approval or disapproval, influencing the outcome or the perceived moral of the spectacle. Similarly, rumors that a criminal's ghost haunts the site may prevent future misbehavior, adding an enduring psychological dimension to the theatrical justice system. Historians still debate the extent to which these beliefs directly shaped legal practices versus serving as post hoc explanations for events that were already morally and socially orchestrated. You observe another layer of theatricality in executioners' dress and demeanor. Some wear masks, hats, or elaborate costumes to emphasize authority, ritual, or intimidation. The same executioner may perform hundreds of punishments in a lifetime, each carefully calibrated for dramatic effect. Apprentices watch intently, learning not only the mechanics of the devices but the performance of fear, moral instruction, and authority. The executioner becomes both artisan and actor, blending practical skill with psychological mastery. Even the aftermath of punishment is imbued with meaning. Corpses may be displayed, heads placed on spikes, or cages left to decay in prominent locations. These remnants serve as permanent lessons for passers-by, a lingering theater of authority that educates, terrifies, and controls. The interplay between spectacle, superstition, and societal norms ensures that punishment resonates beyond the immediate moment, embedding moral lessons deeply into the community's consciousness. By nightfall, the square is empty, torches extinguished, and shadows creeping along walls and streets. Yet the echoes of the day's spectacles remain in your mind, the fear, fascination, and moral instruction interwoven seamlessly with superstition, faith, and theater. Medieval justice is revealed not merely as law enforcement but as a complex cultural performance, where punishment serves multiple functions simultaneously: deterrent, moral lesson, entertainment, and ritualized communication with both the living and divine. Walking away, you sense the enduring tension between cruelty and pedagogy, fear and spectacle, ritual and justice. You realize that for medieval societies, the boundaries between these elements were fluid, creating a justice system as psychologically intricate as it was physically brutal. The lessons, stories, and warnings would echo in oral traditions, influencing generations long after the scaffolds are gone.